Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wine.com Experiences. I'm Gwendolyn Osborne. Thank you so much for joining us today as we take a tour through South Africa and taste 3 delicious wines from 3 incredible wineries. Appreciate everyone who submitted questions. We're really excited to just get into talking about this beautiful place and its wines. If you do have the wines, the 3 wines we're tasting, please go ahead, make sure those are open, get them into some glassware if you can. We are tasting all 3. We hope you will join us. These are the kinds of wines that will last in your fridge a couple days, so no need to feel like you must finish them all tonight. That said, if you ever want to revisit this video, it lives on our Wine.com YouTube channel, so you can always come back and taste. If you're looking for more detailed tasting notes on these wines, you can definitely find those on Wine.com. We have great wine pages full of information with reviews, critics' reviews, winemaker notes, maps, videos, all sorts of great things to dive a little bit deeper. The 3 wines that we are tasting today in order are the Indaba Chenin Blanc, the Hamilton Russell Vineyards Pinot Noir, and the Kanonkop Pinotage. And so now let me introduce you to our guests joining us today. From Indaba, we have Clayton Christians. From Hamilton Russell, we have Anthony Hamilton Russell. And from Kanonkop, Aubrey Bislar. Also joining us today from Cape Classics and the Indaba Foundation, we have Andre Shearer. Thank you all for being here. I'm so glad to have many of you to talk about the wines and, of course, the region. So that's kind of what I want to start with, is an introduction to South Africa as a wine producing region, because it's slightly newer in the global wine world, although it's been producing wines for quite some time. Back in that 17th century, the Dutch, the French, a lot of viticulture going on. But I feel like from the global standpoint, us in the wine world have only kind of been hanging out with South African wine since the early 90s. So Andre, I wanted to bring you in to talk a little bit about that to start. First, thank you so much for joining us. As we talk about the wine region, please, you at home, feel free to start sipping on your wine. Just make sure you have some for when we talk about the wines. But if you want to have a little apéro while we talk South African viticulture, please feel free. So Andre, when people think of South Africa, and I guess Africa in general, I don't think that wine might always be the go-to thoughts, as your country does have, is known for other things as well. But can you give me a little bit of an overview of why the climate and the geography in South Africa is just so perfect for growing vineyards?
Absolutely, Gwendolyn. Firstly, thank you so much for having us. We're delighted to be part of this with you guys. So I think, one of the things, and you guys have been to South Africa, so you know and you understand the topography and the beauty. It's something which I always say to people, I hope somebody in the audience has been before, because then they'll know that I'm not spinning a yarn. The most important thing to really realize is the tip of South Africa, whilst in Africa, where the continental shift can be from desert to tropical rainforest, South Africa is very Mediterranean. And one of the things that's most striking is if you look at the state of Louisiana as a size, the Western Cape, which is the province or the state in which the wine industry is predominantly found, houses more plant species than in the entire Northern Hemisphere. So we're one of the sort of magic floral kingdoms of the world. We've got an incredible climate. We have, right now, it's been a very, very cold winter, lots of snowfalls everywhere, which is not something that people generally think about. And of course, these mountains and these valleys and the verdant sort of spaces in between give rise to the opportunity of producing so many different kinds of grapes in a relatively small area. One of the things that's quite important to realize is there's water that surrounds the Western Cape, and you've got currents that come up from the Antarctic that run up the west coast of Africa, keeping it very, very cold. So as much as you get into Cape Town and you've seen the beaches, there are these magnificent blue, water beaches. Very few people swimming on Clifton Beach, which is probably one of the sexiest beaches in the world. It's just so incredibly cold, and you don't see that at first glance. But within about an hour to hour and a half drive from Cape Town, well, there it is, Cape Town, which is bottom left in the red. You've got this wine country in the province of the Western Cape, and you can see the map as it goes into the central block of Western Cape and then all the way to show the tip of Africa. The currents coming down on the right-hand side would be warmer currents coming from the Indian Ocean, but the wineries are really cooled by this very cold ocean current that comes up from the Antarctic region, I said. So we've got, our grape varietals range from Cabernet through to Chenin Blancs through Pinotage, obviously one of our very famous red wines that we've got, I think some that you'll taste this evening, delicious. So we're just one of the most diverse regions, and clearly 360 years under the belt. Most people think it's this new region on the block, and as you stated, it's not really. It's a 3.5 centuries of winemaking is what we always consider to say we lie between the old and the new. I think wines are really familiar tasting from South Africa. The Sauvignon Blancs tend to have some real beautiful French Sancerre-ish kind of attitudes of acidity, but they also have a lot of the some of the warm climate elements to it too. So I think we're one of those, the best of the new and the best of the old, of course, we would say. But we think it's one of the most beautiful regions in the world, and it produces wines that are on par with the best in class. So
yes, yeah. And we're going to be certainly tasting some of those today. And if I could see the map one more time, I just kind of wanted to point out what we'll be tasting, because I know the Indaba Chenin is a blend of some sustainable vineyards around the Western Cape, but just for those of you at home, the Pinot Noir that we're having comes from Walker Bay, otherwise known as Hermanus. So you can see that there in the yellow in the south. And then the red blend we're having hails from Stellenbosch, which is just east of Cape Town, in the lovely turquoise that matches the ocean color. So just wanted to point that out before we dive in. But thank you, Andre. And one other thing is we are going to be starting with the Indaba Chenin Blanc, but Indaba is more than just a winery. It is, and you are chairman of the Indaba Foundation, and the winery itself just encompasses sustainability and social responsibility. But the Indaba Foundation, can you give us a little bit of history about that specific organization and what happens when people purchase Indaba?
Certainly. Well, the brand itself is rooted in sort of the best quality price value ratio that represents the soil. And of course, as you know, sustainability, if you look at the wine, the necker of all South African wines, there's an integrity and sustainability seal, which was a world first. So Indaba was founded specifically to be representative of the soil, as I say, give really good quality price, but also to give back. South Africa has a tremendous issue of inequality. We have one of the most unequal societies in the world. The industry is working really, really hard. So the Indaba Foundation was founded as one of the organizations, hopefully, to help the industry push an agenda forwards that is really transformative. And we believe that in this particular area, one of the things we can most effectively change is working with the training of teachers to embed a different early childhood system within the wine industry's footprint. So that's a lot of the focus that we're doing. So really the industry, the Indaba Foundation is inspired by certainly the Indaba brand, but the work is industry-wide, and it's really representative of the entire industry. We're really working hard to develop a social sustainability seal that will fit onto the bottle alongside the environmental sustainability seal. And to us, it really is about the children who give us an opportunity. The communities all in and around the Western Cape, there are many hundreds of thousands of children. And we believe it's a truly sort of emphatic way for us to really make a deep impact and change for the future.
Yeah, education is so important. I love those classrooms because they look exactly like my kids' preschools, because it was Montessori.
Montessori.
Yeah, exactly. You can just tell those mats and the shelves and everything. So I'm very familiar with that look. But good for you. I think that's a wonderful thing to create something to give back both to the earth and, of course, to the community.
We try. Yeah.
So let's taste this wine, this Chenin Blanc. I've always been a fan of Indaba, one, because I can afford it all the time, but I do think they are delicious wines. And Clayton, you've been winemaker there, I think, is your second vintage coming up? Second vintage.
Yeah.
So we're going to be tasting the Chenin Blanc, which is kind of one of South Africa's, I guess, signature grape varieties. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of Chenin there?
Hi, Gwendolyn. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I should have said that first.
So Chenin Blanc has quite a long history in South Africa as it stands. It's believed that it was one of the first vine cuttings that was imported into South Africa around about the year 1655. There's another theory that says it came in here, it was imported into South Africa through the French Huguenots in 1685. That was around about the time when the revocation of they call it the Edict Nantes of King Henry IV, where the Huguenots fled France and they came to settle here in the Franschhoek Valley. But I support the first theory where it was imported by our Cape Governor, Jan van Riebeeck, in 1655. So if I look at the early documents, there was about 3 cultivars that was brought into South Africa. One of them was Palomino, Spanish varietal. The other was Semillon, and then Chenin Blanc, which was formerly known, or it's a colloquial, a local term, sorry, called Steen, which roughly translates to stone here in South Africa. And it was around about 1965 where Ampelographus was able to identify all the sites and all the vineyards in South Africa as well, where Chenin Blanc was planted. So around about 1960s, the late 1960s, building up towards the early 1970s, Chenin Blanc was a very, very principal white cultivar in the South Africans wine industry during the white wine renaissance. So the rebirth of a very good quality South African white wines. And this was obviously ushered in by new technologies, for example, control fermentation vessels as well back in the day. So as a lot would know, that it is one of the most widely planted varietal here in South Africa, in general as well, and it equates to about 1/5 of all the vineyard plantings as we counted here in the 21st century. And I looked back into a study of 2007, and it is shown that 19,000 hectares, which equates to about 47,000 acres, is planted, is under Chenin Blanc vineyards, or planted of Chenin Blanc. That's about twice the amount of what's planted in France itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Noir.
So it's grown all over South Africa, and dating back to the olden style, Chenin Blanc was never seen as a quality varietal made in a quality style. It was always made in a bit more of a sweeter style, or rather booted to be used as for brandy. Yeah, back in the day, basically.
Yeah. So yeah, I know that the quality has grown just since back in the 60s, 70s, but also now, and there's a lot of people focusing on old vines as well to bring out that quality. What about you? What do you love working about? What do you love about this grape, working with it, that you kind of can do to bring out that quality?
Gwendolyn, I would say it's Chenin Blanc's versatility. I was actually mulling over this specific question today as well, and I thought to myself, why is it such a special cultivar to me? And I recently read an article written by Ken Forrester that was published in the Tim Atkins on the Tim Atkins website, where he so beautifully described it, and he made use of an analogy. And I had to write it down, and I had to share it because I'm so passionate about it. And he starts off by saying, unlike our beloved dogs or man's best friend, Chenin shows no obvious love on demand. It's altogether way more feline, more cautious, and seemingly unwilling to simply openly brandish love and foist devotion, or show its true feelings to anyone. Mysterious and patient, never obvious, but so refined and deeply satisfying that you unknowingly feel the need to experience it again. That feigned, beguiling beauty, such is the true nature of Chenin Blanc. And it just really made me light up inside, where
Who knew Ken Forrester was a poet? I had no idea.
Yeah, I was very surprised reading it, and was actually quite inspired as well. And I just thought to myself that Chenin is a varietal that doesn't want to be boxed into any specific set of rules or whatsoever, because it caters to quite a wide variety of wine lovers. So I've learned that there's people that enjoy Sauvignon Blanc, and then there's another group that enjoys Chardonnay very well, and Chenin just sits so well in smack bam in the middle. And I think it's very rewarding when you get it right.
Yep.
When you truly get it right, when you get to work with a grape varietal, minimal intervention, and just guide it into exactly what it's supposed to be. Showcasing what it's supposed to be.
Well, tell us a little bit about kind of what we should expect in the nose and the palate here as we go through tasting it.
Okay, so
you have some.
I've never poured
That's
myself
good.
glass.
I know it's late there, so having water.
So Gwendolyn, when we put this wine together, we always we're always trying to keep in mind that we want to be as consistent as possible year after year. So what we wanted to go, accomplish with the wine is to have a dry style but medium to light body wine with a medium minus acidity that's not too overwhelming and overpowering. So we wanted the wine to be of exceptional quality but still good value for money. As you would know, where it falls into the price bracket there in the US. So if we can, if we think about it on the nose, and if I just smell it, there's a lot of tropical fruits that comes forth with the very first smell. And then there's some underlying citrus fruits as well. One thing that really stands out to me is that honeysuckle pear that comes through. And then there's some citrus notes that comes through on the nose as well. And I've obviously tasted this wine on multiple occasions, but it's very consistent year after year.
I get that honeysuckle on the palate too.
Definitely, it definitely pulls through on the palate. And I think what I get on the palate now, but more, is even some melon, and the pear also plays through. And then I'm quite surprised that there's this lingering note of citrus, but some green apple as well that emerges as you taste it, the more you taste it. Sorry. So I think for me personally, when drinking this wine, it's something that you can pour, and every single time you go back to the glass, there's something new in the glass. Mm-hmm. It's layered. It's got good complexity, and it's not a mouthful, but it's got weight on the palate as well. So it's a beautifully made wine, but not too over complex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's by no means simple at all, but it's to me, it's an overwhelming value for what the price is, and I just I love that it goes back into the community as well, and that you're able to make these incredible wines that are the value, the price point, the quality is just magical. So we're glad you're there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. This was delicious. All right, we are moving on to some red wine, to Pinot Noir. Anthony, Hamilton Russell.
Hi, Gwendolyn.
Of Hamilton Russell. Thank you so much for being here. Also, grateful. So this winery, Hamilton Russell, was founded by your father back in the 70s with a goal of making cool climate wines. Can you tell us a little bit about that quest?
Absolutely. Well, my father wanted to go wine farming. As he says, he came at the industry through the glass, not through the land, and looked logically in Stellenbosch initially. That's the right kind of place to start at that point in South Africa in the 70s. And the properties that he was interested in were either not for sale or frankly, not affordable. So his wine mentor at the time, a Hungarian viticulturalist called Dezső Pongrácz, was looking at new areas a little further south, a little closer to the sea, experimentally. And he encouraged my father to look outside of the conventional areas. And the serendipity, the good luck that came into it rather than the design was our family's long and close connection to the town of Hermanus, a seaside resort town about 75 miles southeast of Cape Town. And my father looked around there and found a piece of land that was eminently affordable in the mid-70s and purchased Hamilton Russell Vineyards in 1975. His quest at that time, if you think of the 70s, the obsession was with latitude and temperature and not so much with soil. And if you flipped us into the Northern Hemisphere, we're Rabat in Morocco or we're Santa Barbara in California. So even though we're very far south for South Africa, we're not far south in European wine growing terms at all. And the key feature really is that unusual proximity to the sea. Where I'm sitting in my home study here, we're about 1,800 meters from the South Atlantic Ocean. We can hear it at night from our house.
That is stunning. And yes, I spent 5 or 6 days in Hermanus on my honeymoon in South Africa. So having been there, and it is beautiful, and the sea, but it is cooler. Like it had the breeze, the coolness coming through was quite obvious. And I know you have Pinot Noir, you have Chardonnay. What other varieties are you planting now?
Well, initially, the goal was to plant the noble grape varieties in an area that was basically very cool for South Africa. And my father, like so many wine lovers, came into fine wine through Bordeaux. It's a kind of an easier route into fine wine. So Cabernet, Merlot, we had Sauvignon Blanc, we had Gewürztraminer, but his mentor, Deso Pongratz, did have a bee in his bonnet about Pinot Noir, which was a fortunate thing, because from the very first vintage in 1981, the Pinot Noir stood out as a wine of real interest. And I think it became fairly logical after that to think about making that the feature red on the property. We're in our 40th vintage with the 2020. I'm in my 30th year this September the 13th. And I focused very early on just a single Pinot Noir and a single Chardonnay, not through any insight other than tasting what was being made and deciding only to do what we did best. And the clay soil that we have on the property, which typically was avoided for viticulture, Bockerfeld shale, laid down 400 million years ago under a shallow sea, and been on the surface for over 230 million years, which in kind of global viticultural terms is incredibly old soil. That has a clay content, coincidentally, almost exactly analogous to the Côte de Nuit in Burgundy. And the proximity to the sea gives us average maximum temperatures, almost precisely the same as Burgundy for the 4 hottest months building up to enduring harvest. We're 25 centigrade to 24.77 for Burgundy.
Wow, I would have to do the math there. But I love seeing that picture of that dirt, because I think it is so key on what makes Pinot Noir unique in this region. So I kind of want to taste through it, and maybe as we taste it, you can kind of talk about the flavor profile, the aromas, the structure, everything that we're getting, and how that kind of reflects everything we just talked about for the vineyard.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, firstly, I just want to agree with what Andre said. South Africa has this wonderful blend of the new and old world. And I think when you come to Hamilton Russell specifically, it really is pretty much the old world talking. Now, we're not trying to copy Burgundy, but those are the wines that excite me. And Pinot Noir as a grape variety has an ability to extract all the dark mysteries of place in a way that man can't do without it. And, we have the privilege of living on the property, and each year the wine tells the story of the harvest of the year at a point in time. So what the clay does and what the iron does is immediately give you a more muscular structural component in a grape that is known for often a soft, easy, open, round, almost plump, sweet characteristic, a lighter styled expression. We can make quite a dark, spicy, complex, muscular type of Pinot Noir off the soils we have. So you have to again think Côte de Nuit, wines that you lay down to age. Tannin, the presence of tannin, not as much overt fruit perfume as a spice profile. Christmas pudding spices, licorice, cloves, nutmeg, those kinds of things, as well as that muscular structure, rather than just this very forthcoming, open, charming fruit profile. I've always said it's not about how to make Pinot Noir that's so challenging, it's where to make it. And if you don't have the where to make it right, you can be the best winemaker in the world. You'll essentially produce a fairly simple wine. It's only in certain privileged sites that it steps beyond the simplicity of the grape and creates something a little more intellectual and a little more complex. That's not necessarily what everybody wants, but it's what has put us on the map and enabled us to sell in 56 countries around the world.
Yeah, we have always been fans, and I've had this in my glass for a while, and it's opened up, and there's this kind of wild herb like sage, or just it's just has opened up so much. And so I just encourage you all at home, again, like, open these up, because these will last. They're going to become more and more in your glass. It's just so pretty.
Yeah, we're almost sold out of our 2019 back home, and I know there's sometimes a slightly older vintage in the US market in various areas. And these are wines that we would keep up to 40 years. Our first vintage, 81. If we find any wines from the early 80s, we actually try and buy them and back again for our wine library. So these are wines to cellar and spend time with. And my analogy is fine literature. These are wines you want to go back to, you want to think about, you want to really reread. It's not just an easy, comfortable, comfortable expression. And
not a cocktail wine.
There's plenty of Pinot Noir that's just charming and forthcoming and fruity and soft and round and on the lighter side. And then in certain places in the world, the Hemel-En-Aarde area being one my father pioneered, it steps beyond the simplicity of the grape variety and creates something a little more profound.
It is definitely layers of complexity. It's got the earth, it's got the fruit, it's got that nutmeg spice. So it's that perfect blend. And yeah, it's just interesting. You do want to come back. I like that it's like one of those good novels that you want to come back and read again. Yeah, it's always been one of our favorites. Chardonnay is also one of my favorites, as somebody who always is looking for Burgundian-like that I can purchase. So I'm glad your dad got talked into this, because this has obviously been very successful, both for you and for everyone discovering what Pinot can be in South Africa. So thank you for sharing. We are going to move on to the Kanonkop Cadet, a red blend that includes South Africa's signature grape, Pinotage. Aubrey, I know Kanonkop has quite the history in South Africa's wine industry back to the 1930s, right? Is that way back when?
That's about right. Thank you, Gwendolyn. It's great to be here.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so it's even longer than that. You know, so the property's been in the same family now for more than 100 years. And in 1930, it got subdivided when Paul Sumner at that stage wanted to carry on farming, and his parents were planning to sell the bigger property. And he actually said, no, he loves wine, and they cut up a portion today known as Kanonkop. It's about 140 hectares big. And that's how Kanonkop got started. So even today, you know, the farm behind us, yeah, that is still was part of the bigger Kanonkop, and it was quite a big property at that stage. So as you can see, and then one picture, we are in the foothills of the Stellenbosch mountain, which is a granite mountain. So all the soils, or most of the soils we work with, is decomposed granites, and also a bit of more alluvial soils at the bottom that gives us something different. But because of that, and just to catch on with what Anthony said, over the years, we started to realize what works better on these specific soils. So I think South Africa in general took a while to get there. You know, for a long time, we were planting varietals that suited the market and not necessarily suit the terroir. So Kanonkop already in the 70s started to remove some varietals like Shiraz from our property. And, you know, most of the white varietals to end up with what we have today, a focus on Pinotage and Cabernet specifically. And that's what we focus on, and that's what we try to do as best of our ability. And yeah, so that's how, you know, it's put together today. It's still the same family, it's fourth generation that owns the property, which is becoming quite rare. A lot of American investment in South Africa, which is great to see. Our neighbors on both sides now, almost Americans, and yeah, so it's same family, and I think through that you can create consistency over the years as well. You know, next year will be my 20th vintage at Kanonkop. My predecessor was here 23 years, so with that you can create a certain consistency and style and quality, and carry on with the knowledge, which is also very important in this industry.
What are some of the improvements and changes you've made? Because like you said, it's going to be your 20th vintage, especially when it comes to, you know, any innovations in how you treat Pinotage or the growing and the planting. You touched on that a little bit, but what are some of the things in the past 18 years you think have been the most impactful?
Yeah, I think, firstly, just planting Pinotage on the right sites is been probably the best thing we could have done. And then also the focus on the vineyards, it's when you look at the low yields we have in South Africa in general, it's, we work with about 5 tons a hectare. I'm not sure what that translates to, Andre, in US terms, but it's about 5 tons a hectare, which is quite low, low yields. And so that is something, a focus we've stayed with. And although the demand for the wine is bigger, we don't change the focus and approach to quality when it comes to the vineyards. Then Pinotage is I can probably write a book at this stage about the differences of Pinotage and how unique the variety is. And I always tell people, if you like to go to bed at 12 o'clock at night, you rather shouldn't make Pinotage. It's not for, can't use a general recipe for producing Pinotage. So it's a very specific varietal that, as you know, is a cross between Pinot Noir and Cinsault. And when planted on the right sites, there's a certain amount of the Pinot Noir parent that do come through in Pinotage, which is quite I think special. And also, so when it's planted on different sites, you also see more of the Cinsault parent coming through, which is I think a very good expression of the quality of your sites. Then in the cellar, we've always been doing punch down, open top punch downs, open concrete fermenters. Looks like swimming pools. When people walk into a cellar, it looks more like a museum than a modern winery. It's some of the fermenters were built already in the early 40s. So it's we've carried on in a very traditional way. But when I explain these fermentation processes, I always tell people that technology today is not normally designed to improve quality. So technology is a lot about saving time, saving money, saving space. When you look at places where technology do come from, so you're very tempted to fall into that trap of saying, "Listen, look at my very shiny winery with all my toys," but that's not necessarily going to make better wine at the end of the day. So we've stuck with the things that we can understand and that we can utilize to further quality. And for us, that is still open concrete fermentation. It is understanding of the microbiology that goes on in Pinotage because it has a higher pH. So you have to manage that, and then using proper wood. We use 99% French oak. And proper wood usage on Pinotage is very important as well. So I think one of the big things that's changed over the last 10 years is that we don't look at Pinotage and the variety and try to make what we thought is typical Pinotage, because it's still such a young varietal. It's only, I would say, after 94 that people have started looking at the variety with more international eyes. And so we don't look at what is typical Pinotage. We look at what is quality red wine first. And how does the grapes that we work with fall into that category? Of course, the Pinotage characteristics will come through with the wine, but let's focus on quality red wine. And that is very similar throughout the world. Its structure and its balance and its elegance, its texture. Those things are words that we use nowadays with Pinotage. And I think, we're seeing unbelievable wines. Just the understanding of the variety have changed the quality of Pinotage tremendously.
Yeah, and you're right. It is a young grape. I mean, there's wines of Bordeaux. It took forever to know which grapes should be planted on which soils to make the best blends. For this Cadet, it is a blend. Which grapes are you blending with the Pinotage at which percentages?
Yeah, so the Cadet range developed because back in the 80s, the previous owner, Yannick Krieger, he decided that we needed to utilize the younger vineyards before they get to a certain age. And from there on, we considered them for the estate range, for the more premium wines. But younger plants normally don't have the same structure. It has beautiful fruit, but you struggle to get the same structure out of young vineyards. So he said, let's create a wine that is more accessible, still representative of the farm or the property, but it's more accessible. And so he utilized the younger vineyard. So the Cadet blend has always been quite representative of the grapes grown on the property. So it will vary between 40 and 50% Pinotage normally. Then it's about 30% Cabernet Sauvignon, and about 20% Merlot. And more recently, we'll also be using a bit of Cabernet Franc. So it's nowadays, it started off with grapes just grown on the property, but this wine has grown to be quite a big volume. And we started to buy grapes from neighboring farms as well, just to, to supply in the need. But we manage those vineyards, which I think is very, very important. We actually employed a extra viticulturist just full time looking at all the vineyards that we do buy for this wine. So I think that when you look at this wine, it's Pinotage based with Cabernet and Merlot mainly. It goes to barrels for about 12 months. So just when you look at the process of this wine, or the way it's made, there's very few wines at this price point that goes through the same process. So you're talking about low yielding vineyards. You're talking about the 3 different processes of sorting of berries. Talking about open top fermentation, mostly manual punch downs as well, with it's like pisage and using like old wooden sticks to punch through it's quite clean sticks. It's not dirty, but it's old, and to punch the skins through the juice, and then it goes to barrel. So for a wine at this affordable price, it's quite a serious process of winemaking, and I think you pick the wine. It's
yeah.
I think,
well, let's taste the wine. If you could, can you talk us through a little bit of what we're getting in the aromas and the flavors that might represent some of those grape varieties and winemaking methods?
Yeah, it's I'm thank you for the time and allowing the wine to open up. I've been,
that's helped.
It needed that 20 minutes. So this is the 2018 Cadet that I've opened up, and when you look at the wine, I like to use the word seamless when it comes to even flavor profiles. You don't want to pick the wine apart, otherwise it becomes more one-dimensional almost and simple. I like complexity in the sense of, wow, the wine invites you back to have a look, and now you have some plums, and then you get a bit of black currants, and then you get a bit of more of the cedar wood, but very slightly so. So it's a beautiful complex expression, aromatic expression, and it covers more the darker side at this stage. It's this young, the darker side of the fruit profile. So you do have that plum, black currant, of chocolate, but very very inviting flavors. And it's you need to find that balance between complexity and accessibility when you look at wines in this category. And that's what we try to do. When you go to the palate of the wine, I've always said, this wine, when I come home in the evening, I don't want to think too much about wine. You can get very, you can talk for hours about wine, but I want to come home, I want to open a bottle of wine, I want to pour the glass, and it make me relax. It shouldn't be so complex that you mind, you keep on thinking what's going on here. So it must be a wine that offers a lot, but it's not that difficult to understand. And I think this wine offers that. On the palate, you have balance, you have structure, but not so that it's tiring. It's more of a appetizing experience, that salivating effect that you get when you have a wine with good balance. That dryness at the end that really makes you hungry and thirsty. And that's what we want to achieve with wine.
Yeah, well done, because it encompasses all of those things, and it's beautifully balanced and inviting. And yes, I'm salivating, and I'm looking for food to go with it. So well done. I haven't had I've had the Kanonkop Pinotage many times in my life. It just has been a while, and I'm so glad I've been reintroduced to it. All these 3 wines were so delicious and yet wonderfully diverse, kind of showcasing obviously what South Africa can do. Andre, I kind of want to get back to you just regarding the state of South African wine industry, because I know you've been through a lot with the pandemic. I think has been particularly affected the wine industry. And as head of Cape Classics, which is the largest importer of South African wines, can you give us a little snapshot, I guess, of where the industry stands right now?
And it's kind of been a bit of a tragedy because the industry has worked incredibly hard for decades to, I think, really modernize itself to be very socially conscious, to be environmentally conscious, as we said. So what's happened, lockdown, the government took it upon itself to determine that wine consumption, alcohol consumption was considered really dangerous for the encumbrance to the hospitals and the way the people's habits would, of course, affect, the medical system. Unfortunately, what has happened is, the wine industry employs 300,000 people. It's an incredibly important asset in the region to the worker community. It's one of the larger contributors to gross domestic product. It's an incredibly important element of South African tourism, as well, as you remember. And sadly, what's happened is the numbers range between, I think, up to 80 wineries probably have already fallen out of business. There's been an incredible job loss, and all of this is having dire socioeconomic consequences, which the area and the region can ill afford. Fortunately, there have been some extraordinary viral campaigns abroad, just saying, just let's do everything we can to help, because the export markets, whilst they were also shut down for a period, they reopened. So thank heavens we could get our wines onto the international stage. But it's unfortunately, nobody in South Africa wants, we have a large infection rate, but a very small mortality rate, fortunately. And it does not seem to make any sense that this lockdown is resulting in such a dramatic problem. And it's not over, of course. So with the folks that couldn't ship wine for a number of months, some of them have had cataclysmic outcomes, and they may not continue to produce. And that's the saddest part of all, is an industry that is aspiring to do really good things, very tight-knit community. I think really pulling its weight in context in the region and in the country, and to be severely punished like it has been, it's been a really bitter pill to swallow. But the industry is prevailing. People are working really hard. And I think we will survive it, as we have many other complications. But we certainly love the support we've been getting. So we love the fact that people have been very generous and kind to the category.
Good, yes. And you at home, that is what you can do. You can support the South African wine industry. It's quite easy. Buy a bottle of South African wine and drink it, and repeat, right? So, well, I'm glad people are coming back, getting back on board, and kind of getting back into the groove. I know that is more difficult when your whole industry is shut down, including just having to be shut down as a society. So, well, we are huge fans, again, of South African wine. After visiting one day we'll get back there. I just want to thank all of you so much for coming on to tell your stories, to share your wines. I know it's late there, so appreciate your time and your passion, and for creating such incredible wines. I really think these just showcase such a great diversity to highlight what South Africa has to offer. So if you have not already, please check out this trio of wines on Wine.com. It is still available, or just please browse our entire selection. We have a large and wonderful selection of all South African wines. And we appreciate all that you do, and we're happy to support it. And may your evening, well, I guess it's probably bedtime, but
well, Gwendolyn, thank you so much from all of us. We so appreciate Wine.com's passion for what we do, and we really appreciate the business. So you guys rock. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Aubrey, Anthony, Clayton.
Thanks, Gwendolyn. Thank you.
It's both a science and a form of high art. It's made from the combination of grapes, sunlight, rain, soil, and time. It's raised up in the moments that matter. It's wine. And we are Wine.com. We have the largest wine selection in the world, online sommeliers with free advice, And now, our powerful new app puts the entire world of wine in your hands. Wine.com, seriously passionate about wine. Download our free app today.